Welcome back to the 10-Minute Podcast. You know the drill. No time for intros or introductions. What is Joe Biden's legacy? Well, people from all sides of the aisle are weighing in on this question after the breaking news story from last week that Biden pardoned his son Hunter. Let's see what CNN has to say about this.
What I think is not disputable is that this is a historic act of political nepotism. This is the granting of a pardon by the president to his son. Joe Biden even says, if you really parse his statement, he acknowledges that a substantial part of this is because Hunter Biden is his son. And that will land Joe Biden on a historic list that he probably doesn't want to be a part of, along with Bill Clinton, who pardoned his half brother, Roger Clinton, along with Donald Trump, who pardoned Charles Kushner, who is the father of his own son-in-law, Jared Kushner. So I'm sure Joe Biden understands the historic implications of what he's done, and now he's earned his way onto that list. That this pardon will tarnish Joe Biden's legacy. I mean, Joe Biden, let's be clear here, he lied to us for a long time. He said categorically, I will not pardon my son. He said, I will take it off the table, and he couched it in very high-minded terminology. I respect the Justice Department. I respect the jury's verdict. Well, now he's gone back on that.
CNN, about as left-wing as you can get, questioning Biden's legacy, going so far to say that Biden has tarnished his legacy. Now, while talking about this, we need to talk about, and this is what conservatives are pointing out, what is Joe Biden's legacy to begin with? Of course, he served as a senator, vice president of the United States under the first black president, and now, of course, the president of the United States for one term. But his career has been riddled with controversy over his very long career. So the question is, what is his legacy, if he has a legacy at all? Well, we're going to leave that up for you all to consider and think through and discuss in the comments down below. Let's move on to our next story. We covered a few weeks ago this trans issue that was overtaking Capitol Hill. Well, it seems like the transgender debate has moved on to another section of our government, the judicial branch of government. The Supreme Court had opening arguments for a case involving the Tennessee law that bans transgender surgeries for minors. They had, as I said, opening arguments this last week. And though we haven't had an official ruling yet, many people have come out and said it looks like the Supreme Court is going to vote to uphold the law. Now, this isn't the only transgender decision that is being considered or has been considered from the Supreme Court. It is one of monumentous importance. However, there was an article from The Hill that came out this week, quote, the Supreme Court declines to intervene in challenge to Wisconsin school district's transgender policy. The article went on, quote, the Supreme Court on Monday declined to intervene in a case involving a group of Wisconsin parents who sued their children's school district over a policy meant to support transgender students, letting two lower court rulings dismissing the case stand. In a brief, unsigned order, the justices denied the parents' request to review the lower court decisions, which conceded that while parents may have genuine concerns about a Western Wisconsin school district's gender support plan that allows transgender students to use a different name and pronouns at school without their family's consent, the parents involved in the lawsuit lack standing to challenge the policy because none of them have a transgender child. So I'm not totally 100% familiar with this Wisconsin controversy, but it would seem, to explain this, that the school district has said transgender students are allowed to, on school property, go by a different name than their legal name, the name that were given to them by their parents. They can go by a legal name, a different name that they choose to go by. They can go by different pronouns on campus on school property without any consent or notice from their family, their parents, their legal guardians. Obviously, some Wisconsin parents have reacted against this. and they've pushed back against it. It's gone all the way up, and now the Supreme Court has said they will not be taking a look at that case. What is this? Does this in any way connect to the Tennessee case? I don't think so, because these two cases are different in that, yes, they both deal with transgender issues, but the one is about how people identify. The other one is about the actual surgeries themselves that are taking place on minors and the state's rights to intervene in that. Whereas the other one is more about school district rights. So that is obviously all very interesting. And the reason we bring it up on the show is because, like I've talked about before, it's fascinating to see these sort of cultural questions be answered, or at least be confronted, by politicians and people holding political office, because oftentimes they try to shift and distract and not answer these questions that are at the center of the cultural debate. They try to push them off, but obviously this was an issue that Trump ran some of his election ads on, and now it's coming out. People are very interested one way or another concerning this debate, and so no longer does it seem the politicians are going to be able to shy away from them, especially since transgender people are getting more and more representation, as well as more and more outspoken. The conservative right, who is going to try and be reactionary towards this, is going to have to continue to step up if they want to stop this transgender movement from growing. All right, let's move on to our rapid fire headlines segment for the week. We got a little bit longer headlines. Let's get right into it with our first one from Fox News. Quote, Harris's campaign still asking for donations weeks after massive loss to Trump. The New York Times says, quote, Supreme Court appears inclined to uphold the Tennessee law on transgender care. That would be the one we were just talking about. Bloomberg.com ran an article, quote, South Korea set for more turmoil after Yon escapes impeachment. Northern California declares state of emergency after 7.0 earthquake, reports CBS News. NYPD releases 2 new photos of man sought in killing of United Healthcare CEO, reports NBC News. The New York Post ran an article, quote, Trump uses NBC News interview to defuse panicky liberal fearmongering, teases sweeping agenda. Newsweek ran an article, quote, Women pleads guilty to eating cat in crime that sparked Springfield claims. The Guardian ran an article, quote, Ukraine war briefing, Trump urges China to help end Ukraine war. White House announces nearly $1 billion more in military assistance to Ukraine, reports CBS News. The Associated Press ran an article, quote, Canada's ambassador says Trudeau told Trump that Canada border can't be compared to Mexico's. The Washington Post says, quote, Newsom tries to walk Trump tightrope defense as he eyes future White House run. And then Fox News reports, quote, Trump floats DeSantis as potential defense secretary replacement if Hegseth falters. Finally, the New York Times ran an article, quote, Biden team considers blanket pardons before Donald Trump's promised retribution. On that last point, this is the natural follow-through of what happens when you begin to use the justice system as a weapon, when you begin to weaponize the justice system, as both parties seem to be leaning towards and seem to be preparing and even have been doing in recent years. When you begin to do that, you begin to use the presidential pardon as itself a weapon, as a defensive tool against weaponization against your party. Very dangerous, but could become the new norm now, as we see more and more presidents and parties use the justice system to attack their political opponents. Finally, we got some more information on the Middle East. Trump took to his social media accounts to say this, quote, everybody is talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East. But it's all talk and no action. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be all HE double hockey stick to pay in the Middle East and for those in charge who perpetrated those atrocities against humanity. Those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. Release the hostages now, Trump says with all caps. Obviously, Trump has talked on the campaign about how he's going to take steps to de-escalate the wars in Russia and Ukraine and the Israel and Hamas situation. Here he is saying that hostages need to be turned over. We need to stop playing the hostage game. And according to the Times of Israel, quote, Israel and Hamas exchanged lists of names for release as talks advance, report. So it seems like we could be getting closer and closer to hostages being released from both sides. We'll continue to see if the war de-escalates, if that is due to Trump or just it's been a year, the war has carried on and will possibly de-escalate now. We obviously saw the ceasefire last week that is still shakily in effect as of the time of filming. So we'll continue to report on and continue to see what happens with Israel and Hamas with this war, especially as we get closer to Trump's second inauguration. All right, that's all the time we have this week for the show. Make sure you subscribe to Politics for Teens. Let us know below how we're doing with nonpartisan education. And we will see you next time on the 10-Minute Podcast.